Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and here to talk with me about Real Steel
Yes.
and World's Greatest Dad
And World's Greatest Dad.
is Michael.
Yep.
What was the idea? Dads? There's dads on the
It's
show today?
fathers and sons, and I guess it's...
And
one of them is
robots.
horrible in each film.
There's something horrible in each film, and also something fathers.
Right.
Double feature, year 7. What year is it? I don't even know what year it is. How are we expected to talk about these films? We're going to spoil the movies.
Yep.
If we can, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use chapters to avoid the spoilers. Robots, go. Oh, sorry. Real Steel is the first film we're going to talk about. Real Steel, the one with the fighting robots?
Yeah, well, Real Steel was, I guess, originally touted as this film about fighting robots, where Wolverine boxes with robots.
I thought it was touted as the Lost Reunion film. Is
yeah,
that not what we're
there
doing?
was that too, yeah. Also touted as Rambo with robots.
Oh, jeez.
Many touts of Real Steel.
So there's Kevin Durand, who plays Kimi
Right,
in Lost.
who also plays the Blob.
Yeah, is
in
in
Wolverine Origins.
Wolverine. Ah, jeez. There's a lot of weird crossover things
Yeah.
happening in Real Steel from a totally different arena than our audience
Don't say
might
arena.
be. A totally different robot underground than our audience might be used to. Wolverine's made of adamantium. It could
Right.
be a robot
Yeah,
underground.
don't say Adam.
And then Evangeline Lilly. It's
Right.
weird coming back to this so many years after Lost. It's like seeing old friends.
Yeah, it
again.
really is. And her character in the film is very much like an old friend type character. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
feels like Kate.
Years later and jaded.
You never really get a background on Evangeline Lilly's character,
Right.
but she's, I guess, Charlie's old friend, old flame.
They use the strategy of let's give you 2 or 3 sentences that heavily tell you what happened here.
Right.
No fucking subtlety about it, and then just never talk about it again.
I mean, that encapsulates what I love about Real Steel.
Sure.
And it's that Real Steel is this film that embraces every fucking cliche in cinema.
Sure. Well, so tell me about that.
It unabashedly decides to be this film that, I mean, honestly, if you were to look at Real Steel on paper, like actually look at it on paper, not look at the trailer,
Yeah.
but look at it on paper where you realize that it's a film with a lot of heart and it's about a boy bonding with his father,
Yeah.
and not as much about just fighting exploitative style with robots.
Sure.
It really just goes through every arc that all of those films tend to go through. We have, the father who's a deadbeat father, and he's down and out, and he's just completely irresponsible.
Right.
And surprise son, and then he ends up having to stick with the son, even though he really would,
Sure.
much rather just be on his own. I mean,
I could see the trailer for that film.
Right?
That is not the trailer for this film.
No, that's true.
I think anybody who maybe watched Real Steel for our show or hadn't seen it before this, or maybe even just the first time they saw it, there are different trailers for it. And
Right.
some people might have anticipated that it was heartwarming, children's film
Sure.
going into it. I didn't.
Right.
I thought it was Hugh Jackman exploitative robot movie.
Right. Well, you and I tend to go to the same films and watch the same trailers. I mean, when you go see, I think, Thor or something.
Yeah, probably.
You go
somewhere
see
around there.
Thor, you go see one of these Marvel films that was coming out, and you get the trailer for Real Steel that is trying to compare itself
Sure.
to the Thor audience.
Sure.
It's showing you that it's Wolverine fighting with robots
Yeah.
in an underground kind of
Yep.
gritty, dirty robot boxing film.
Sure.
I mean, the trailer I saw could have been called Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the joke that I think I had going into seeing Real Steel was, yeah, this is going to be a movie about robots punching.
Yeah.
And I got in there, and there were moments where, like, I just sympathized with the characters,
Right.
and I was really happy that the father and the son were getting along. I mean, this
The
film,
humanity catches you completely
Yeah,
off guard if
and
you're not ready for that.
it takes you for 2 rides.
Well, so I was wondering if you think that does the movie a disservice.
The
Because-
trailers?
Well, because you see this trailer,
Yeah.
and it advertises the film as, something different than what it ends up to be. And then you go to see the film, and there's You know what? There is more dancing robots than you expected.
That's true.
It's that kind of movie.
Right.
So does that work to the film's advantage? I mean, we talked about, the humanity catches you off guard.
I definitely, it hooked. Had I known that it was a heartwarming father-son film, I probably wouldn't have gone to see it. I mean, I saw it in the theater.
Answer right there. It got your ass in the seats, and otherwise we would not even be having this conversation.
Right. But, I mean, for me, to jump to the final fight scene where Adam is fighting Zeus.
Yeah.
And it's just this culmination of both sides of the theater, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's both trailers combining. You have this badass robot battle combined with the moment that the father and son finally, become redeemable as a pair.
Sure.
And Charlie's reliving his rocky youth.
Right.
I mean,
right.
The moment for me, and I think it's in both trailers, when they do the slow motion and Charlie's shadowboxing Adam.
Sure.
And they do that, the jumping punch where he's punching to the right in slow motion. I mean, that moment for me is just amazing because it's just as badass as it is heartfelt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It makes me care so much about these characters, but the characters are all your standard cliche, you know?
Especially the way they start, too. You're right. The surprise kid thing is such a movie cliche. There's the sort of unique origins, I guess, of the carny trash. I mean, that's not for our show. That's
right.
By this point,
but
that
in a family film, carny trash is not your typical starting point.
Well, and there are weird things here, and the bullfight almost seems vulgar to me for how family oriented everything else is.
Right.
By the time a robot is brutalizing a bull, I look around like someone's going to call me out on watching this. Like PETA's going to show up at my fucking door. And PETA does have my address. So, I mean, fuck you, PETA. But it's the perfect background for, debt-stricken robot fighter from the future. See, I'm making this not sound like cliche movie. So here we are at the carnival where there is a debt-stricken robot fighter.
Yeah.
This is set in the future. But it's sort of the small town southern kind of NASCAR aesthetic that we started.
Well, I mean, this to me is it's kind of akin to Rocky VI.
Mm.
He's not what he once was, but he's making do with what he has.
I kind of wonder if he ever once was. We hear he once was.
Right.
We see pictures.
But even in the once was story, it's him losing. He just loses valiantly.
Right. Right. Yeah, loses a little better than he does today. It does seem like world's biggest loser of all time.
Sure.
I mean, you want to talk flawed character. This isn't even the crown champion that once was. We hear that, but we just see him fail over and over and do he tries to sell his kid.
Well,
I mean,
that's
the worst person ever.
Well, and I mean, to go back to the idea of the cliches, how fucking obvious is it that we have this ex-boxer who's notorious for taking a lot of punches and then losing.
Yeah.
And he ends up having to shadow box with a sparring robot whose job is to take a beating and then fall down.
Well, and then that was the kind of competitive advantage with the Rocky thing when we watched those movies.
Yeah.
It was, Rocky's the guy who's got a lot of stamina.
It's a lot of heart.
He can, and the heart too. Yeah. Don't overlook that. But he could take a beating. That was his tactical advantage in the ring.
That's his advantage.
That and the southpaw thing, I guess.
Right.
But it was, he was a sparring robot, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the advantage here with the robot.
Right.
But not necessarily with Charlie. Charlie just takes a beating. It's not he takes a beating so that he can finally win in the end. It's he takes a beating to lose over and over. And then ultimately also loses the robot battle.
Right.
The big climax moment where they finally, overcome all obstacles and win, they still kind of fucking lose.
Yeah, they lose and they're the people's choice,
People's champions, yeah.
But that's the thing is really the film is so much about the underdog.
Yeah.
I mean, there are underdogs to the underdog in this film. We have Charlie who's been beaten down his whole life, and then he has a kid who he treats like shit.
Sure.
And his best friend is like struggling to keep her business alive, and Charlie won't even pay her. And then he buys this X-boxing robot that's Japanese, and it gets the shit kicked out of it. I mean, the entire former portion of the film is the characters you're supposed to love getting the shit kicked out of them.
That's one of my favorite parts of the whole movie.
Yeah.
That specific scene where after he tries to sell the kid, and then the point where the kid goes, just give me half the money and I'll take off.
Yeah.
Doesn't even consider the moral part of that equation. It's just, well, I don't want to give you half the money.
Yeah, I need this money.
But yeah, if that money just fell in his lap, he probably would have given it to the kid.
Right.
And, oh yeah, you just want to live in New York on your own for
Sure.
6 months or whatever. Are they in New York? I think they're in New
so.
York. Whatever. Every movie is set in New York. Of course they're in New York.
But instead, he uses the money to purchase Noisy Boy.
I don't have the money. I spent it on a robot.
Right.
Like, what the fuck are you doing with your life?
Does
He have any redeeming qualities? I mean,
his
what?
redemption is his humanity. I mean,
Sure.
the characters are so believable. You take a film with these standard, I mean, they're almost stenciled character archetypes, you know what I mean?
Right.
By the end of the film, you're just supposed to go, right, and then the father and son get together because it's a movie.
Sure.
But instead, when they're friends and he's a good father and whatever, you feel, yeah, that is the logical arc of this character based on the series of events I've watched. Yeah. And the film doesn't go to say, well, then he adopted his son and they lived happily ever after. It goes to say they almost won a battle. He redeemed himself as a human being to his biological son, and then his son had to go live with his aunt.
Well, he goes back and, picks up his son for one last fight.
Right, and this is after he's lost.
Yeah,
he's blown
He's
it.
just trying to live up to their original plan at this point. That's the most he can do is go, oh yeah, there was that one thing where you wanted to fight Zeus, so I guess we can at least do that. That'll be fun, right?
And the one thing that this film doesn't do with the cliches, and I give it so much credit because it would be so easy, is the film doesn't end with the moment you realize Adam is actually alive.
Oh yeah, there's that. God, I didn't even know if that would come up.
There's kind of this subplot to the whole film from the very beginning when Adam reaches out and catches the little boy as he's about to fall to his doom.
Yeah.
There's this subtext to the film that the robot, the robot that nobody believed in, the reason he's able to succeed is not because he's been trained so well by these human beings, but that he has heart himself.
Sure, yeah.
And at the end of the film, they allude to it, but it's completely...
You mean The Secret? Right. Sorry, not The Secret, not capital S.
We'll get to that in the World's Greatest Dad.
Oh, God. But, the don't worry, I won't tell anybody your secret.
Right.
Strange, is this a family moment for the film, or is the robot magic?
Right. They allude to it, and they kind of lead it on, but I think the entire arc there is just to... It's an element of hope, and it's not an element of, ooh, magic robot.
Yeah, right,
good thing they found a magic robot.
Sure.
If the characters don't have that level of hope and that level of dedication, you're not going to see them win. You're not going to see them get to where they get to.
Sure.
It's not believable for the underdog to get to fight the greatest fighter in the world unless there's some rationale for it.
Sure.
And the characters are they're down and out, and they're so used to being the junkyard dog that they're scrappy. They're going to fucking push because they can't get lower.
Sure.
They can't lose anything at this point.
Well, and that's the robots too. I mean, you want to talk about scrappy. They bring home this fucking thing.
Right.
So for the first half of the movie, you don't even know what the sort of poster robot, where that's going to come from.
Sure.
Because they keep losing so fucking often. You have the robot in the beginning that gets gored by a fucking bull.
Sure.
And then you have the
Noisy Boy.
Yeah.
The Japanese one.
Super awesome Japanabot.
Yeah,
and
gets decappuccinoed by what's his name? Midas.
Yeah,
with the mohawk.
Yeah, and I was thinking, oh, maybe they'll win Midas.
Yeah,
and I keep going. Oh, when are we going to get to the point where we have the title robot that I can emotionally invest in? Because I don't want to invest in the losing technology.
Right.
That's just not part of who I am.
Right.
So I'm thinking maybe we're gonna build a robot, but we come
upon a robot,
the worst robot possible,
the lamest robot. And this is of course following the explanation as to why robot boxing is the thing instead of people boxing,
which I love.
Yeah, isn't that great?
It's the logical conclusion.
Right.
We push this to as far as it will go, and then we realize, why are we doing this to people? Let's just do this to robots.
And because we can kill robots and robots, and then it's the original robots were the same size as people and they looked like people.
Yep.
But that was boring, so we made them huge. And and then after you get this whole explanation, like Charlie gets robots, he's gonna build the best fucking. You get one of the people looking robots.
Yep.
And you're bored again.
Oh, people bot. I like that explanation though a lot more than, oh, that Robot Wars thing on Discovery Channel came back and people actually liked it this time. It stayed on the air.
The other thing that I love about Real Steel is that it's set far enough in the future of robot boxing that there can be an underground and an overground.
Sure.
The notion
this
of
is like second wave,
right?
Of
Yeah.
robot boxing.
It's the fucking Mankind, you know? It's backyard wrestling.
When we talked on The Wrestler about that.
It's backyard wrestling versus WCW.
Yep.
And
it's the sort of underground that Eminem's Till I Collapse, which is, by the way, still popular that far in the future. It's a song on the end of an Eminem album from fucking 4 albums ago or something. There's a couple pieces of strange contemporary music in this.
Yeah, not the least of which is Danny Elfman scoring in an absolutely minute way for the first time in his career, almost.
Right.
Or
Not
one of
in the over the top robot movie.
Right.
Nonetheless.
Yeah, that's true.
That's where Elfman thought it was time to bring the subtlety.
Yeah.
A little bit back in. It's the heart. He has to bring the heart.
Yeah, and you're right. He's not the only oddball in the music world of Real Steel.
The Eminem thing's weird, but that's really this will go in the pantheon of weirder things I say in double feature.
Oh,
but this is from the time in Eminem's career when I could defend him as an artist, and I feel like his music has never been more at home than in an underground robot boxing club.
Yeah,
there's also that Prodigy song featuring Tom Morello,
right?
That shows up in here. One Man Army, it's called. I think they did that for the Spawn soundtrack back in the 90s. Every action film is basically better with songs by The Prodigy.
Mm-hmm.
Not always better with songs by Limp Bizkit, but
yeah.
I won't call that one out because I don't want to hurt Wes Borland's feelings.
Right. The one part that we downplayed, because I think that was the part we expected everybody to be excited about, was fucking robots.
Oh, yeah, right.
So the robots...
I feel like we're downplaying robot dancing,
right?
But we could say just robots.
Robots in this film are so fucking awesome.
I love the building. I mean, no surprise there. But I love the building robots and the bringing all the pieces together.
Right.
And that Evangeline Lilly has a fucking shop.
Sure.
That is like a robot chop shop / boxing.
I mean, it's screaming for a video game, and then the video game was awful. Don't talk about it.
Oh, no. Is there really a... Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
But the thing about the robots is that it's not easy to take something that everybody's going to be so critical of.
Sure.
If you see a film and it's about robot boxing, it's got to really own robot boxing.
You got a thing about robot boxing, make robot boxing awesome or you will fail.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, I think one of the coolest parts of it is, all right, you have this control interface, you have a thing where you talk to the robots, it's voice commands, and then there's shadow boxing.
Right.
Which is, if we want to go back to that Rocky idea of, all right, it's an underdog, I kind of hate when it's an underdog and they win just because of heart. So I kind of like, in a movie like Rocky where we have the southpaw thing, or in this where shadow boxing is sort of the, that's how they win. Kind of win. It's
kind of a return arc where it go to the conversation about where robot boxing came from.
Yeah.
It's people weren't as cool as they should have been, so we made giant robots, and at the end, if you just went back to people, they kick robots' asses.
Right. World's Greatest Dad is directed and written by Bobcat Goldthwait.
Sure.
That's how you pronounce that, Goldthwait. It's not that hard when you look at it for 20 minutes and prep for your show. Who is this?
Bobcat Goldthwait,
comedian, right?
He's a comedian. He's Jack Cheese to Robin Williams' Marty Fromage.
Okay.
They were a comedy duo.
Yeah.
When they first got started, that's why they're kind of back and forth in all these movies. Bobcat, he cameos in this film. I don't know if you know that.
Bobcat does?
He does. He's the limousine driver who sits on the bed.
Really?
That's Bobcat Goldthwait.
He looks a lot different than when I saw him last.
My number one exposure to Bobcat Goldthwait, go figure, I'm a child of the 90s, was Nirvana.
Sure.
Heavily affiliated with Nirvana.
Well, you also hide this, but Nirvana is, you want to go back to this comparison, it's my Nine Inch Nails, I think, for you.
Yeah, it really is. Nirvana is the band that really got me into music.
Sure.
And Bobcat Goldthwait opened for them.
So they would play a show, and he would be the opening.
He would be the opening act.
Crazy.
And he there's funny. You could probably find it on the internet. There's an interview where Bobcat Goldthwait pretended to be Dave Grohl.
Really?
Yeah, in a Nirvana interview, and just completely fooled the news anchor.
Yeah. People will recognize him for his voice, I think.
Yeah, it's his voice.
Just
for
sure. YouTube that shit. You'll
get it right away.
He's done a couple other films too, and I really hope we manage to get his other stuff on the show. God Bless America was his newer one, but he did Shakes the Clown way back in the 90s.
Oh my God.
And I think that's written, directed too. Also did this movie called Sleeping Dogs Lie. Mm-hmm. I'll just give you the elevator pitch on that one.
Okay.
It's a movie where a girl is encouraged to tell her fiance about all of her past, so they can be completely honest to one another. And that includes an incident of bestiality. Problems ensue. It's got one of those Aristocrats-esque posters with the dog with the tilted glance on the front cover. Just weird movies, Bobcat. But some of the stuff in World's Greatest Dad, I mean, the direction is outstanding. I want to talk about the writing, though. I want to talk about the dark humor in this.
This is, if you want to talk about dark humor,
yeah.
We always say Death to Smoochie
sure.
is the dark humor film.
Sure.
But this film is... dark humor, hold the humor, almost.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Light on the humor.
It's just funny through how mean one
right,
human
that's
being
what it is. Is
really
there aren't
be.
any jokes. It's just so dark.
Right.
And you know that it's it's the kind of dark where it happens and you sit there and hold your mouth and you say to yourself, I know I shouldn't be laughing.
Sure.
But it's hilarious.
So there's that scene with Mike I always remember where there's this kind of unspoken thing between him and Robin Williams' character. Also, Robin Williams is in this. Robin Williams' character, Lance, where Lance is a writer. He's trying to get all this stuff published. He's working really hard. He's been getting rejected constantly. Obviously, that's going to play into it. But then Mike writes this little fucking thing and gets published in the New Yorker.
Right.
Just
it's not
first,
a national magazine.
Yeah, first fucking... Well, it's the worst thing ever for Lance, and it's comic.
No, there's a different worst thing ever for Lance.
It's the second worst thing for Lance. It's comic in how mean it is, because he gets published, and his piece sounds kind of dumb, first of all.
Yeah.
It's got a play on iRobot, which it just seems a little stupid. But it creates a tie-in for double feature, which is great, in that there's robots in both movies. Thanks, World's Greatest
was that
Dad.
the idea for the pair?
Yeah, there you go.
Films that mention robots.
But this guy's never even submitted before. So this is his first thing. And then on top of that, everyone wants to read it just to, stab the knife, twist the knife a little more. And one after another, people enter the scene and, oh, did you hear this thing?
They refresh the excitement.
He was the first one sitting there to hear about this. And now just over and over. The principal comes in, oh, we should read it at the assembly. And his sort of, girlfriend thing, whatever, is super impressed by it. It's a fucking awful situation for him. It's writing that plays into that idea I know you're a huge fan of, which is lowest common denominator.
I hate
You love
worst.
broad comedy. You love when it appeals to everybody.
And this is coming on the heels of doing a show on Real Steel.
I
hate lowest common denominator.
You do. You really do.
I
do too.
it.
I mean, I pick on you for that because of Real Steel.
Right.
But you know what I mean. It's despise.
It's so, it shows this. You can't be original and lowest common denominator.
It's true.
Because
it's
it's
true.
easy to please a mass audience as long as you do nothing interesting and nothing offensive.
Right.
And that is the opposite of what double fucking feature is even about.
So he's written all these books that no one cares about. They're probably the more, at least for him, the more artistic, personal books. Whether they're crap or not, we will never know. We do get glimpses at the diary, but that's almost a commentary that he's writing. And then he finds this sort of doorway to mass appeal. He writes these journals that are going to appeal to everybody. And he wants to title the journals, and this is a perfect representation of what I'm talking about. He wants to title the journals, what is it? I Am What I Hate.
I Am What I Hate, or something like that. Because it's something that Kyle actually wrote in the journal.
Yeah, fake Kyle, actually.
Fake Kyle.
Fuck fake Kyle.
Fuck every version of Kyle.
You're okay with fake Kyle. You just don't like real Kyle.
I'm a little more okay with fake Kyle.
So asshole Kyle didn't even write this line, but Lance wrote the line. And so he's trying to explain to Claire, oh, it's a thing he wrote, and, give insight to that. And Claire just goes, yeah, that's lost to me. How about you don't know me? Because we didn't.
Right.
Because we didn't.
And I love the way that she says the title. She says the title as if the book will read the title to you.
Right.
Because you see the title, You Don't Know Me, and you see it written on paper, You Don't Know Me. It doesn't go, You Don't Know Me.
Right.
But that's what Claire seems to think. Claire seems to think the title will scream, You Don't Know. Like, the title will have sass.
Right.
If you put certain words in italics and maybe phonetically write it out.
Well, and so this gets to the essence of the reason I don't like lowest common denominator. You make a really good point with, well, it's hard to be original. Even though Real Steel, as you were championing, managed to do a couple things. But it's a lot harder, and you find it a lot less when something's generic like that. That's really the word, generic. Yeah. I hate it because it's the least thought-provoking possibility.
Right. It's lacking poignance in any case.
Well, look at these fucking titles.
Right.
I mean, a title like I Am What I Hate kind of sucks, but so Kyle kind of sucks, and you have to believe that he wrote it.
And you kind of, I Am What I Hate, at least ask the question, what does that mean?
You ask a question.
Right.
You ask what it means.
Sure.
Thank you. That's exactly it. And you go through the book, and maybe you try and figure out you
find it in context. Yeah. You figure out, oh, that's what the title's getting at with.
Yep. It's just like an episode of Double Fucking Feature.
Right.
It's, we hear a titular thing in a movie. We kind of go to see a scanner darkly. What the fuck does that even mean? Sometimes the film doesn't even know what it means. But probably we just don't know what it means. And we have to sit here and kind of scratch our heads, and it provokes thought. You don't know me there's nothing else.
It's a statement.
There's no layer.
When it starts, you know who you are.
Right.
And then you're familiar with don't know. And then me comes and you say,
and
well,
the book's
who
over.
wrote this?
And the book's over, and you have all of popular fiction.
Exactly.
I hate popular fiction.
It's the worst. No, actually, the worst
is Kyle. Okay. You hate Kyle, but you like Daryl. Right?
I love Daryl Sabara. No, don't get me wrong. Daryl Sabara does a wonderful job.
Just the look he gives in his portrait picture is enough to okay, check, he wins.
But he is a star as a child,
but you hate Kyle.
I hate him. I hate everything about him. He is absolutely the least redeemable character I've ever seen in any film. And they make him that way. I mean, he's written to be this awful, irredeemable person. And you need that character if you're going to have a film with this premise. If the premise is father who has nothing going for him, single father who has nothing going for him, has worst son ever, worst son autoerotically asphyxiates while masturbating to father's girlfriend.
Oh, God.
And father's life is not better.
Right.
You need to have a son who is just as bad alive as by killing himself.
Right.
You need a son whose life sucks as much as your child committing suicide.
Sure. Well, and then that scene where he dies just proves, even in his death, he's going to do one more dickish thing to his father. It's a scene, it's a bad made worse scene. His father walks in, sees his son die, doing the same fucking thing from before that he tried to have a conversation with him about how dangerous it was. Not that even matters at this point, but that already sucks. Your kid's dead. I got to use that phrase. We're not even talking about Oprah yet. Your kid's dead. And I owe Sylvia Brown 5 cents. Your kid is fucking dead. You walk in on his body. It's terrible. And then you see on his cell phone, he had some naked photos. So that's kind of bad. And they're of your girlfriend. It's even worse. And he might have been looking at him when he died. Don't even think about that. So you go on his computer to write a fucking suicide note. And you see the pictures again, as if to confirm. It's like the pictures tapped him on the fucking shoulder.
Sure.
And said, remember when you tried to brush off the notion your son may have been masturbating to this? I just wanted to remind you that's definitely what he was doing.
Right.
That was, in fact, the case.
It's horrible.
It's the signature of the humor, though. It's always the worst situation ever, you think, and then it gets way worse. It just gets way darker. I think that's what makes this type of dark humor different than necessarily the death to smoochie humor or some of the other dark humor we've talked about.
Because that's more of a humor where it's jokes about dark subject matter.
Sure.
This is dark jokes.
Dark jokes about a dark thing that get darker. And, we always try and find that in each sort of subgenre of dark humor. How does this make it the ballsiest type of dark humor? How does this make it the most, gut-wrenching thing? But beating these jokes in, it's the same sort of thing I think you and I like in horror. That was the Rob Zombie Halloween thing I think about, the French extremism thing, the just beat in somebody's face and then crush it even more and then show more crushing.
Yeah.
And you're way over the fact that there was kind of a scare shot. and that it's violent, and now you just want it to stop.
Right.
It's just unnecessary.
I mean, it gets to the point where it's beating you in the face.
Yeah.
It's really every time somebody gets hit in the face, you're getting hit in the face.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening with just the fucking sadness.
Sure.
In
Please
World's
stop
Greatest
making
Dads.
it sad, please. But I beg please, but I want it to
Sure.
keep going. That's the sadomasochistic relationship I have
Right.
with horror films and with dark humor.
And it doesn't hurt that Lance is just as pathetic as Kyle is the worst.
yeah, right.
Lance is just completely docile and letting shit wash over him.
Sure.
And I mean, there are moments in the film where you watch him not do stuff. The one that seems very obvious is when he sees Claire and Mike in the mall.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know me as a human being, if I were seeing somebody and they were hanging out with somebody that I thought, there might have been some... Anyway, if I were in that situation,
Right.
I wouldn't be a dick about it, but I would go and say, hey, what are you guys doing here?
Sure.
Just want to know I saw you, instead of passive-aggressively, what did you do today?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I
right.
saw you.
Yeah, it was really passive aggressive. Well, he's awkward. He doesn't know how to bring it
I
up.
don't even know if it's that he's awkward. I think it's that his home life is spent being pathetic.
Sure.
Because
Too
he's
pathetic.
just stomped on by this horrible human being.
Awkward and too pathetic, I guess. They're just the same thing
Yeah.
to me. There are scenes that really almost speak for themselves as mini films, as just little shorts. And that gets back to Bobcat's directing style and what I really like. That demonstrate, they kind of have one objective and they're almost a little vignette into themselves. One that talks about Lance, he's
Sure.
buying the porn magazines. He's on the street, and the camera is just dead on Robin Williams. And you kind of have, the way the camera's positioned, we're looking at the back, the just
Sure.
barely covered brown paper
Right.
porn magazines. And you kind of have this soft music playing, and he's just staring, and then he starts to cry.
Right.
And it's its own mini film
Sure.
in and of itself.
Don't forget that then Chris Novoselic from Nirvana walks over and
Sure.
stares at the magazines.
Beautiful.
And kind of, what are you...
Consoles
Okay,
him a
I'm
little
sorry,
bit.
man.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah, it's a short film.
It's true. It really is.
There's a couple music moments like that too. The I hope I become a ghost
Yeah.
kind of thing.
That's a straight... It really is almost a music video. It's a music video where you require the background of the film to understand why.
Maybe you do. You don't require anything. That's what's great about
That's
music
true.
videos. You do anything and no one gives a fuck.
Right.
The kind of point of this, transitioning from one scene to another, is to set up that everyone is going to read into this book themselves.
Sure.
I guess another great thing about lowest common denominator,
Yeah.
who knew that would be the point of the show?
Is that you don't get an answer. That it doesn't have its own message. It just...
Sure.
conveys that it has a message.
By using a bunch of general statements and being super vague, it has mass appeal. Everybody just thinks Kyle was them.
Right.
They see Kyle
Sure.
in their favorite outfit as someone they could get along with. They're projecting their own
They
personality
knew
on
he
him.
loved Ozzy.
Well, otherwise, you just have to blindly accept, oh, everybody turned out loved this book.
Uh-huh.
But this gives you kind of a little reason, oh, Kyle died and everyone just saw his ghost. They read the
Right.
book and they went, oh, now I finally understand.
Sure.
It explains in one music video why this becomes a bestseller.
Yeah.
And then you never have to address that again.
Right. Well, and my favorite of the vignettes, again, to just kind of illustrate the gravity of a point in 3.5 minutes,
Sure.
is right when Kyle dies. And it's Love is Simple. Just the phrase love is simple is such a vast phrase because you either agree completely or disagree abhorrently
Sure.
to that phrase. There is no, love is kind of simple, isn't it?
Right.
And this is the moment where his son has died by mistake. It's not even by any intention.
Yep.
It's a complete accident that his son is dead. And you get the whole rush of, the youth dying before their elders.
Sure.
And even though he's the worst kid ever, you get this horrible moment. And this is right after he's turned down what may have been the last fully pleasurable moment of his life, which would be fucking his girlfriend.
Yeah, right.
And he comes home and you watch him make this suicide note
Sure.
and try to cover up the fact that his son died masturbating.
Right. Is a miserable
it's just this
person.
convoluted mix of disgust and empathy and sympathy, and the song just drives home as clear cut as this may be. The son is dead.
Right.
The depth of the feelings of he was the worst, but he was still my son, and I don't want him to go out like this, but am I doing that for my own benefits?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so deep, and it's just 3.5 minutes, and that could be an entire film in itself.
And totally different ideas than the other. I mean, we've talked now about 3 vignettes, sort of vignettes, and just completely different ideas that the movie wants to portray, which are all kind of different than the main points of the film, too. These are ways of him kind of putting the pause on things and saying, all right, we're going to take a step aside here, and we're going to just sort of digest this little bit of information about the worldview. We're going to say, all right, he has this straightforward kind of love for his son. He's going to do... I mean, I almost think about it as, I guess it's layered, it could be selfish, too, but I feel like he does it unconditionally because that's just what he has to do as a dad. He's just accepting that that's his role. And so that explains, much like the other one was explaining the pop culture of the book, this is explaining, well, why did he cover it up? What was he feeling in that moment? Let's give this 3 solid minutes to just go, this is how that event went down. So you never question that again.
Sure.
You know, the porn one speaks to that kind of desperation, that moment of sadness, trying to dig himself out of that. At the same time, also maybe says something about remembering.
It says something about where Kyle lives in his mind.
Yeah.
Kyle lives in this disgusting, depraved place, and it still hurts to go there.
Yeah, that was something Kyle did all the time was, and you know, this is an interesting part of the arrangement of the two of them living together, father and son, is that Kyle could be depraved constantly. And while that's super awkward and terrible to be around, you get so much exposure to it, you don't even flinch at it. Kyle just always says awful sexual things about everyone at all times.
It's because he's the worst human being in the entire world ever made. And the only thing that ever should happen to him is that he should just go in his room and never, ever, ever, ever leave because he's the worst.
Unless you read his book and then you think he's Mandy fucking Lane.
Right.
Kyle is nothing, and therefore Kyle is everything to everyone at all times. Oh, and I love they're all staring into the camera at that bit. Anyways, sorry, away from the vignettes. I guess it does that with humor, too, though.
Yeah.
You do have these miniature jokes where it's not just drive the humor home. It doesn't rely on that one mechanic. It switches it up, and it just kind of, you know, it's almost one-liners. There's a scene where the counselor is talking to the principal, and the principal's talking about the turnout at the funeral or whatever, and the counselor just goes, well, it was a weekday, and just moves straight on.
Right.
You know, the film almost can't stop itself from, it cuts back to the principal enough for him to, like, do a double take and go, what, did you just say that?
Yeah.
Because it does need to hammer in its own, even the one-liners that are briefly treated, we need to show character reactions just to drive it in a little bit more. So the big points to the movie, the big takeaway for me is that idea of end justifies the means.
Sure. Well, it kind of follows the A Million Little Fibers idea.
Sure.
But the thing for me is that, and I talked about it before, about how Kyle was so bad that his suicide was no worse than him being alive.
Right.
And, I mean, he just shits on Lance, and life just shits on Lance.
Sure.
And in the end, Lance, I mean, I guess he kind of goes, my son was horrible. He left me with no good feelings. So I guess I'm gonna get my money's worth,
right,
so to speak. I'm gonna cash in on the fact that my son is dead.
Yeah.
And, you know, he ends up touring it and going on Not Oprah and
Oprah, by the way, the worst human being ever. Right. So if we had second worst human being ever and then Kyle is worst human being ever, Oprah would be like the worst Omega.
Okay.
Well, so Oprah enables the worst human beings ever, is what she does. She's like the overseer of worst human beings. She has a platform by which, you know, people can go on her show, and she touts these books.
Sure.
We talked about Capital S Secret.
Right.
You know, the reason these self-help books or these pseudoscience, these terrible things become huge because Oprah has no critical thinking and is a showbiz person and will put any kind of Sylvia Brown, psychic, whatever
Towley,
nonsense.
Chuck Klosterman. I mean, you name it, she gives it power.
Oh, fucking terrible. Well, and it's a perfect thing for this movie because it speaks a little bit to how showbiz this has become and how detached it is. You know, we get to see that behind the scenes kind of producer speak of constantly saying, I'm so sorry about your loss. Also, here's how we have a really good show. Here's how you exploit this as best as possible. I'm sorry about your loss. I have to keep saying this, and also exploit. It's a gig to them.
Well, yeah, and the thing is you kind of get this feeling that Lance maybe deserves some of this glory because his life has been so bad and he's been, in such a horrible place. And it's really nice that the film, instead of letting it come out through improper channels and then everybody turns on Lance, the film lets Lance decide, these people make me feel just as bad as Kyle did.
Yeah, right.
And I would be much happier with my hoarder cat lady neighbor
sure.
and my son's weirdo abused friend.
Yeah, right.
And I'm going to make my own family because all these people are the worst. Even Claire, we see, his girlfriend of the entire film, she doesn't get him. And she hates zombie movies.
Yeah, right.
And
they're terrible for each other.
She comes up with this horrible type. Yeah, they're completely wrong for each other.
Well, and is it wrong to exploit?
I'm not trying to say
that
it's right. Exploitation of a human being, living or dead, is probably generally...
Even if they're the worst person ever?
Yeah, you can't... that just makes you a less good person.
Sure.
You can exploit a bad person and other people will tell you, hey, thumbs up, but the reality of the situation is exploiting a person is probably less moral than not exploiting them.
Well, and I think the reason for that is when I think about Kyle, the place I put him as the worst person ever is sort of, if you think of kind of the graph of humanity, he's that point in the curve that approaches zero.
Right.
The curve never actually gets to this person has nothing to offer humanity. It just comes, as close to that as possible without being that.
Right.
And that special place on the graph, that is Kyle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so no, not okay, but you kind of get where Lance is at. Sure. And this is a movie about terrible people. It has to be, they have to be incredibly flawed. That's part of the character, is to be barely likable, if at all. You do feel a champion moment when Lance kind of gets naked and falls. That's his sport, by the way, falling. There's the brief moment on the Fuck Oprah show where he thinks he might be found out, in his own words. And it's kind of referencing that Million Little... What was the name of that book?
A Million Little Fibers.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That's definitely the title. Referencing the kind of debacle that was. Just getting it moving in people's minds like, might be called out on TV. But that's not the story this is interested in telling. That's not... It feels like a climax for a movie, but it's not the right one here. So we skip over it. He gets out of that situation. And then that just becomes his awakening moment. Yeah. That just becomes the moment where he can then go back to the library... dedication, where Bruce fucking Hornsby plays. Just the movie keeping everything straight the whole time, never telling you, like you said, never telling you it's a joke. Just Bruce Hornsby's actually going to come play. Bruce Hornsby doesn't get the joke either. We're just going to keep nailing it in instead. And, visually, I like what they do with that scene a lot. They do it throughout the movie. Everybody's in red. All the kids are in the school uniform red. Lance is standing out amongst everybody. He does not fit in here. These people who kind of love his work through the lie doesn't fit in with them, and it's his time to make that separation on his own terms. Doesn't get called out on it. Right. And leaves the rest of the people to go back to not living their life as a lie. I mean, that's the other part of the, making this big lie here, is that it snowballs. It's, at first it just seems like, okay, we're covering up his son's honor or whatever that is. Mm-hmm. And that little lie becomes, has your son ever written anything else? Start shopping the thing around. It's in a fucking envelope, just like his manuscripts, the fucking journal. Everybody reads it. They all start living their lives based on this lie. He can't even get consolation from anybody because they always come back to, well, at least his journal helped all these people. No one's in on his secret. No one can really be there for him. So he fucks his own life over. And he fucks with all of these people just because in that moment he chose to tell the one tiny lie, which makes it wrong. There you go. There's your answer. It's wrong.
Wow, that's a pretty heavy show we had there. Not really. Robots and autoerotic asphyxiation. Thanks, Double Feature. If you want more robots or autoerotic asphyxiation, we've done David Carradine on the show. If you want to know what David Carradine has been in, doublefeatureshow.com. If you don't understand the reference of David Carradine on today's show, it's not to do with robots, and you can ask us at doublefeatureshow@gmail.com.
Well done. The movies we're going to do on the show next time venture far from family films. Irreversible and The Woman.
Wow, this is gonna be fucked. Watch more fucking film.
And goodbye. Also, Apple Teenies are a thing that.
What?
Let me tell you, man.
Oh my god.
Debbie Gibson has got me on the Apple Teenie.
Okay.
It's there's a I like drinks. It's like a weird fascination I have. And I've been without Arizona raspberry iced tea for a while. So, I'm mixing it up a little bit.
Quite literally.
I have this thing, yeah, right, sitting on my desk here, and it's green and it tastes like apples and it's great. You don't drink?
I don't drink.
I like to check in with you now and then.
Don't drink.
I don't drink either.
Okay.
I had no idea what cocktails taste like because I haven't drank since I turned 21. So I haven't had a drink in a long time. And I blame, again, I'm just going to keep blaming Debbie Gibson because it's funnier to me. But Crystal Light has these things they came out with, which they think are really funny. They call them mocktails.
Wow.
And it's Crystal Light, and it tastes like this one tastes like an Appletini. So there's no alcohol in it. But now I can drink it, and I know what an Appletini tastes like. And I understand why everyone else is a drunkard suddenly. Margarita and mojito, not so great. Don't know what all the rage is about those. Apple fucking teeny, man.
Become redeemable as a pair.
Sure.
And Charlie's reliving his rocky youth.
Right.
I mean,
right.
The moment for me, and I think it's in both trailers, when they do the slow motion and Charlie's shadowboxing Adam.
Sure.
And they do that, the jumping punch where he's punching to the right in slow motion. I mean, that moment for me is just amazing because it's just as badass as it is heartfelt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It makes me care so much about these characters, but the characters are all your standard cliche, you know?
Especially the way they start, too. You're right. The surprise kid thing is such a movie cliche. There's the sort of unique origins, I guess, of the carny trash. I mean, that's not for our show. That's
right.
By this point,
but
that
in a family film, carny trash is not your
right.
typical starting point.
Well, and there are weird things here, and the bullfight almost seems vulgar to me for how family oriented everything else is.
Right.
By the time a robot is brutalizing a bull, I look around like someone's gonna call me out on watching this. Like PETA's gonna show up at my fucking door, and PETA does have my address. So I mean, fuck you, PETA. But it's the perfect background for, debt-stricken robot fighter from the future. See, I'm making this not sound like...
and not as much about just fighting exploitative style with robots.
Sure.
It really just goes through every arc that all of those films tend to go through. We have... the father who's a deadbeat father, and he's down and out, and he's just completely irresponsible.
Right.
And surprise son, and then he ends up having to stick with the son, even though he really would, much rather just be on his own. I mean, I
could see the trailer for that film.
Right?
That is not the trailer for this film.
No, that's true.
I think anybody who maybe watched Real Steel for our show, or hadn't seen it before this, or maybe even just the first time they saw it, there are different trailers for it. And some people might have anticipated that it was heartwarming, children's film going into it. I didn't.
Right.
I thought it was Hugh Jackman exploitative robot movie.
Right. Well, you and I tend to go to the same films and watch the same trailers. I mean, when you go see, I think, Thor or something.
Yeah, probably.
You go see Thor, you go see one of these Marvel films that was coming out, and you get the trailer for Real Steel that is trying to compare itself to the Thor audience.
Sure.
It's showing you that it's Wolverine fighting with robots in an underground kind of gritty, dirty robot boxing film.
Sure.
I mean, the trailer I saw could have been called Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the joke that I think I had going into seeing Real Steel was, this is going to be a movie about robots punching.
Yeah.
And I got in there, and there were moments where, I just sympathized with the characters, and I was really happy that the father and the son were getting along. I mean, the
humanity catches you completely off guard if you're not ready for that.
It takes you for two rides.
Also, I was wondering if you think that does the movie a disservice.
The trailers?
Well, because you see this trailer,
Yeah.
and it advertises the film as, something different than what it ends up to be. And then you go to see the film, and there's, you know what, there is more dancing robots than you expected.
That's true.
It's that kind of movie.
Right.
So does that work to the film's advantage? I mean, we talked about, the humanity catches you off guard.
It hooked. Had I known that it was a heartwarming father-son film, I probably wouldn't have gone to see it. I mean, I saw it in the theater.
Right there. It got your ass in the seats, and otherwise we would not even be having this conversation.
Right. But I mean, for me, to jump to the final fight scene where Adam is fighting Zeus.
Yeah.
And it's just this culmination of both sides of the theater. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's both trailers combining. You have this badass robot battle combined with the moment that the father and son finally...
And who plays Kimi.
Right. Who also plays the Blob.
Yeah, is in
Wolverine Origins.
Wolverine. Ah, jeez. There's a lot of weird crossover things happening in Real Steel from a totally different arena than our audience.
Don't say
might
arena.
Be. A totally different robot underground than our audience might be used to. Wolverine's made of adamantium. It could be a robot underground.
Don't say Adam.
And then Evangeline Lilly. It's
Right.
weird coming back to this so many years after Lost. It's like seeing old friends.
Yeah, it really is. And her character in the film is very much like an old friend type character. I mean, it feels like Kate.
Years later and jaded.
You never really get a background on Evangeline Lilly's character,
Right.
but she's, I guess, Charlie's old friend, old flame.
They use the strategy of let's give you 2 or 3 sentences that heavily tell you what happened here.
Right.
No fucking subtlety about it, and then just never talk about it again.
I mean, that encapsulates what I love about Real Steel.
Sure.
And it's that Real Steel is this film that embraces every fucking cliche in cinema.
Sure. Well, so tell me about that.
It unabashedly decides to be this film that, I mean, honestly, if you were to look at Real Steel on paper, like actually look at it on paper, not look at the trailer, but look at it on paper where you realize that it's a film with a lot of heart and it's about a boy bonding with his father.
Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and here to talk with me about Real Steel and World's Greatest Dad.
And World's Greatest Dad.
Is Michael.
Yep.
What was the idea? Dads? There's dads on the show today?
Fathers and sons, and I guess it's...
And
one
robots.
of them is horrible in each film.
There's something horrible in each film, and also something fathers.
Right.
Double feature. Year 7. What year is it? I don't even know what year it is. How are we expected to talk about these films? We're going to spoil the movies.
Yep.
If we can, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use chapters to avoid the spoilers. Robots, go. Oh, sorry. Real Steel is the first film we're going to talk about. Real Steel, the one with the fighting robots?
Yeah, well, Real Steel was, I guess, originally touted as this film about fighting robots, where Wolverine boxes with robots.
I thought it was touted as the Lost Reunion film. Is
yeah,
that not what we're
there
doing?
was that too, yeah. Also touted as Rambo with robots.
Oh, jeez.
Many touts of Real Steel.
So there's Kevin Durant.